Good morning, everybody, and welcome to The Art as Well, your source of connection, inspiration, enlightenment, all those good things from artists right around Ireland and beyond. I'm delighted this morning to have Alan Clarke as our guest. Alan is primarily known, I suppose, as an illustrator, and he illustrated all of the books of the Ross O'Carroll Kelly series by Paul Howard. And lest I'm ever accused of exaggeration, on the email I sent out to everybody, I said, and he's done 16 of these books. Nah, he's done 26 of these books. So a lot more than I thought. I'm sure you'll join me in giving a warm welcome to Alan. Good morning, Alan. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. Pleasure. So am I right in my description? You've actually illustrated 26 of these books.
Yeah, approximately. I actually, I'm not entirely sure what the exact number is, but it's like 25, 26, something like that. So it's been going over 20 years at this stage. Amazing.
And it also includes a weekly article in the papers as well, doesn't it?
In the Irish Times, yeah. There's a column in the magazine with the Saturday edition of the Irish Times every week. So there's an illustration that goes along with that as well.
Fantastic.
As well as the ongoing series of books.
So there must be thousands of illustrations involved over the years, are there?
Thousands and thousands and thousands. Yeah, I've stacks of paper and sketches and drawings, like, you know.
Really?
So thousands, literally thousands.
And how did all this start? Because I know you initially trained as an architect. So let's just start there, shall we? Or no, actually, let's go back a bit further, because your parents were in the art world.
Yeah, I was born into a sort of a artistic family, I suppose. My father is a silversmith, and my mother trained as a painter, but ended up kind of practicing in the fashion design world.
Oh, right.
So I was brought up in an artistic household, so I suppose it was kind of inevitable that I was going to find my way into that world as well.
Okay.
Albeit, as you say, I did take a kind of a post-school diversion into architecture for a few years. I studied architecture
because
for 3 years.
Your parents thought it was a more stable job to get?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
So tell us, what was your experience then?
I left school quite young and didn't really know what I wanted to do, other than that I kind of knew I enjoyed drawing pictures and making images and things like that. But I got accepted onto this architecture course, and it was deemed to be a good idea that I go down that road, at least for a while, because I was a little bit too young to be making sensible decisions for myself at the time. So So I studied it for 3 years in the end. Before
what was it about architecture that didn't appeal to you, that made you go off in a different direction?
I kind of actually knew even before I started that it wasn't really what I was going to end up doing, but the romantic notion of what an architect does and the reality of what an architect does are a million miles apart. And as the course was progressing, that was becoming more and more apparent. There was less and less of the kind of design and art side of it, more and more kind of legal stuff, contractual stuff, engineering stuff, that kind of thing, which is all fascinating in its own right, but it wasn't really what my calling in life was.
No, that's very interesting you say that, because obviously a number of other people in the art world have shared a similar experience. The likes of Francis Matthews and Robert Balley, even, they've all studied architecture and then decided, no, this is not where I want to be. So
I don't regret it. Sorry to interrupt you. I don't regret it for a second, I should say, because it's a very rounded education. Like I learned an awful lot, and I made very good friends. But just in terms of practice, it wasn't for me.
Okay. So what direction did you go off once you decided, right, that this isn't for me?
I went to England and I studied illustration in Falmouth in Cornwall, and that was right up my alley.
And how long did you do that for?
I did it for 3 years, so I studied there for 3 years, but I actually subsequently went back there about 10 years after that too, and I did a master's. So I spent 2 separate periods of time in that college over there.
Okay, and did that bring you directly? How did you get the gig for Ross O'Carroll Kelly? And was that the first one? Was that the first sort of commission?
Not really, no. It was probably the first one meaningful one, really, let's say, that
Yes.
kind of led on to bigger things. But it was initially, Ross O'Carroll Kelly began as a weekly column in the Sunday Tribune, the now defunct Sunday Tribune. And after this had been running for a while, Paul Howard, the author, decided to publish a collection of the columns himself, sort of self-published them. And this was picked up by the O'Brien Press, an Irish publisher, who decided that they would publish them properly, let's say. And someone in the O'Brien Press, I don't know who it was, whether it was Michael O'Brien or Ivan or maybe Emma, the art director, but someone had the masterstroke of having this book illustrated. And the reason I say it was a masterstroke is because Ross O'Carroll Kelly, for any of you who don't know, Ross O'Carroll Kelly it's a social satire, basically. And it's the world described through the eyes of the main character, Ross O'Carroll Kelly, he's sort of a South Dublin private school rugby playing jock, let's say. And he's vain, he's a narcissist, he's horrible to women, he's horrible to everyone, basically. But he's kind of lovable at the same time. But it's a first-person view, so it's his view on the world, whereas the illustrations are a third-person view. So it's the world looking at Ross. So you have the contrast of Ross's view on the world with the contrast of the illustrations, which are the world looking at Ross. So while Ross's view of the world is kind of informed by vanity and narcissism, I get to pull the whole thing the other direction with the illustrations, because they're grotesque in the extreme. Yes. And I get to sort of totally undermine the text, basically, you know, and the dynamic between the two works very, very well.
Yeah, now that's a very interesting point, and it's something I'm really fascinated about, and that is, how does your brief translate into your work? In other words, you know, who decides what you should illustrate? And, you know, is there somebody saying, oh, I want 10 characters over here and they're all screaming? And
no. So Paul Howard, the author, picks the passages that he wants illustrated. Okay. There is a kind of a practical side to it as well, in that it works best if they're kind of evenly distributed throughout the book. So there won't be 3 illustrations one page after another. They're kind of spread out. Yeah. So he picks the passages he wants illustrated, and then I'm just left at it. You know, it's at this stage it's a very well-oiled machine. So there's rarely any kind of reworkings that have to happen. Occasionally there's tiny details need to be changed, but we have, myself and Paul and the publisher have a very, very good sort of 3-way understanding where we all trust each other completely, I suppose, you know, and it works very well.
But can I ask you, do you have to read the book and say, look, you know, I think it would be great if we showed this, that, or the other? In other words, how much of it is you?
Those decisions are made generally by Paul, actually. So he decides which scenes he'd like illustrated, and if there's any specific details that need to go in. And generally those details will refer to the main characters in the scene, but in most of them, they're highly detailed. So there's a huge amount of incidental characters and sort of incidental activity going on, and all that is me. Like I dream up all that stuff.
Well, exactly, because I mean, if you're looking at it as the third party, you know, you're seeing the character for what you see him or her as.
Yes.
And you have the sort of lateral ability to do that.
Yeah, but my job is made pretty easy because Paul's writing is so good. Like, the characters are brilliantly described, and they're characters. The beauty of them is that they're characters that we all know. That's why it works so well. I mean, they're grotesques, but at the same time, we see people that we know in them. So I think because there's that level of recognition, people really respond to it, you know. Yes.
No, it's fantastic. I love it. And where does the sculpture fit into all of this? Because I gather you had an epiphany in 2018 March, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I did.
What happened?
In March 2018, I abruptly moved into the third dimension and became a sculptor. And it happened it happened totally organically. I didn't plan it. So basically, I had been working in 2 dimensions as an illustrator, to some extent as a fine artist, for nearly 20 years. And the way it came about was, my brother works in the film industry. He's a model maker. And he had hired me for a couple of months he was working on a big science fiction film in a studio down in Limerick. And I went down there and worked with him for a few months. And it was very, very intense work. So at the end of it, we decided we'd go on holiday for a couple of days. So we went off to Barcelona for a few days. And while we were there, he signed us up for a 5-day or 5-afternoon, I think it was, portrait sculpture workshop in the Barcelona Academy of Art. And it was just to kind of keep us out of mischief more than anything else. It was an activity holiday. There was no further point to it, really. And it changed my life. That was the moment I became a sculptor. It sent my career off at a 90-degree tangent, and I kind of haven't looked back since.
Yeah. So your practice is sort of divided. What proportion would you say is now sculpture as against illustration?
Maybe like 3/4 sculpture, 1/4 illustration at the moment.
Complete reversal.
Sorry?
It's a complete reversal from a few years ago.
Oh yeah, sorry, a complete reversal. Yeah. Now I would say it actually varies from time to time, because I had an exhibition in the United Arts Club recently that was all illustration. So I spent a period of time where I was only drawing. I wasn't doing any sculpting at all. Yeah. But broadly, like spread out over time, I would say it's about 3/4 sculpture and about 1/4 illustration.
And I should say to people, because I know this intimately, because I'm a member of the Arts Club, that the exhibition, there were people queuing from outside the door up the stairs and couldn't get in.
Yes.
And also it was the first time in the history of any bar in Ireland they actually ran out of Guinness.
They ran out of Guinness. They did. Yeah. I think we were all taken a little bit by surprise by the amount of people that turned up. And for anyone listening who doesn't know, the Arts Club it's a very nice place, but it's not a huge venue. So there weren't thousands and thousands of people, but it was very very gratifying, I suppose, that so many people chose to come, and even some of them even were patient enough to queue up to get in, which was very nice of them.
I know, and they also ran out of red dots, I believe.
Yeah, and red wine.
Disaster, absolute disaster. Very good. Yeah. So that's brought me off in a complete tangent now. I don't know where I am. But anyway, that was hugely. Oh yes, what I think we should do now, given we're talking about sculpture, is have a tour of this, because you have your illustration practice in a studio elsewhere. Is that right?
So I have a small studio in La Catedral Studios on Thomas Street, or just off Thomas Street, near NCAD, where I do my drawing work, basically. It's just a small little place. Unfortunately, materials-wise, sculpture and drawing are not terribly compatible, because a lot of the sculpture materials will be kind of wet and dirty. So whereas drawing needs to be obviously kept clean and dry. So I have two separate places for
and with sculpture, you do want a warm, cozy studio.
Sorry, say that again.
You do want a warm, cozy studio for sculpture? No,
not necessarily. Like it can actually, for working with clay, it's actually better that it's a little bit cooler and a little bit damper. It's not so comfortable for the artist, unfortunately, but for the clay, it's good, because it obviously doesn't dry out as quickly.
Exactly. So Alan, because the signal isn't great there, and also at certain parts of your room, the signal is almost non-existent, you did a video for us.
Yes.
So what I'd like to do is just to give everyone an impression of what your studio is like. We're going to show a video now, and you can talk over it, Alan.
I will.
What we're looking at, okay?
So this is the studio that I do the sculpture in now, rather than the drawing, and it's not terribly glamorous, as you can see. It's really just an industrial unit, but it's very suitable for what I do.
Whereabouts?
It's Ossory Road, in Dublin, just off North Strand.
Okay.
So you can kind of see there's an upstairs in it as well, and it's got a kind of nice high ceiling for working on big projects. And you can see all the bits and pieces. I do a little bit of a walk around here, so we'll zoom in a little bit closer on some of the.
And I'll stop it if you want me to stop it.
Some of the works. Okay. So this first one here is a female figure study I actually did during a workshop recently in Rusborough House. And I will have to, at some point, decide what's going to happen with this. It's starting to dry out, so it will need to be molded or cast at some point. They can only be wrapped up for so long, unfortunately, before the clay starts to degrade. Yeah. This is half life size. and it was done from life over 5 days.
Beautiful. It's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see kind of in the background there, like all my tools and stands and things like that, and photography backdrops.
Yes.
This is another one. This is a portrait study that was done just last weekend, in actual fact, of at another workshop. Again, coincidentally, this was in Rusborough House down in Wicklow. I think this, I turned this around a little bit so you can see it from other sides.
Yeah.
So this was done over 3 days. I teach portrait sculpture workshops. They generally last three days. So this was just
with the Schoolhouse for Art, isn't that right?
Yes, sorry, with the Schoolhouse for Art, exactly. And they have a new venue in Rusborough House, which is it's a great place.
Apparently so. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can see then up in the back wall here, just some examples of work from over the last couple of years. They're mostly portraits. Most of these are in plaster. Just I keep them as a kind of a record for myself. Some of them are bronze. The white one on the end there is that's a portrait of a young Italian actor that I did in London a year or two ago. And you can see Francis Ducey there. That's a portrait of him. Most of you will probably know him. He's a brilliant art model.
Yep. That's
a bronze of him. And various other ones. The kind of blue-green one is Augustus St. Gaudens, the Irish-American architect. That one on the top shelf, the white one on the left, I actually did as a model for a marble sculpture. I decided I wanted to learn how to carve marble. And I took that, so I sculpted that and took it off to Italy and used it as a model. So somewhere over in Pietrasanta in Italy is a half-finished marble sculpture that I've promised myself I will go back and finish at some stage.
So do you go to Florence quite a bit?
Florence, yeah, the marble is in Pietrasanta actually, which is a different place, but I've been to Florence a number of times. My video has just stopped here. Have we?
Oh no, that was because I thought we were just concentrating.
Oh, sorry, apologies. Okay, sorry, I didn't know if the feed had stopped.
So
Pietrasanta is actually the town where the marble artisans lived, close to Carrara. And Carrara is obviously where the marble came from, but marble carving is not really for me. It's too slow. But I just wanted to sort of give it a go.
Sure.
That one there, the one on the at the top, the white one, was a portrait of a young ethnic Peruvian girl, and I actually did that in Florence a couple of years ago.
Go backwards there to see it.
Go back a little bit, yeah. I sculpted it in Florence, and I made a plaster mold of it. I couldn't bring the clay back to Ireland, obviously. Yeah. So I made a plaster mold, and the mold got damaged on the way home in my suitcase. And when I kind of pieced it back together, kind of jigsaw-like, and when the cast came out of the mold, it had all these really, really interesting defects on it that made the piece much more interesting than it would have been if it had just been a straight portrait. It gave it a whole other dimension, gave it a kind of a more richer story, I suppose, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
And that one there, that's the one I mentioned. That's Augustus St. Gaudens. It was a portrait of. He's a Irish-born but American sculptor, and he actually designed the Parnell Monument at the top of O'Connell Street.
Oh, did he? Yeah.
And these are various other studies and portraits. Some of these are proposals for commissions, and some of them are just personal work, and some of them are demonstration pieces from workshops.
Yeah.
And little maquettes for projects. And you can see all the tables and stands, all the wooden furniture there. That's stuff I use during workshops. And this is a work in progress, a portrait of Tony Strickland, who most people probably know. Tony the Hat. He's a well-known character. This was actually started before the exhibition in the United Arts Club, so I had to sort of put it on pause, but I will come back to it at some point.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is another very recent one, another portrait. This one started as a demonstration piece during a workshop, but I subsequently got the model back and finished it off in my own time.
Yeah. I just noticed there on the right-hand side, you've got various, what would you call it, anatomical details.
Yeah, they're measurements from that. That's a kind of the leftovers from a workshop. So they are various anatomical measurements to do with creating a portrait.
Yeah.
And you when you're measuring, you use kind of anatomical landmarks. When I'm sculpting, I don't actually measure at all myself. I work totally by eye, but when I'm teaching it, I encourage the students to take measurements.
Yeah.
Just it gives a framework to work within,
Of course, yeah. Very beautiful. Lovely.
Thank you. That's my sculpting tools, just a little roll of them. I have found, just as time has gone by, that I actually use very few tools. I would say maybe about 5 different tools that I just use for everything.
Yes.
And I understand that actually happens with most sculptors, that you start by experimenting with loads of different tools, and then you gradually refine down the collection to the ones that you just use frequently.
Yeah.
All my bags of clay.
Clay, yeah.
And then on the table at the end there, you can see a mold in progress. So that's a silicone rubber and plaster mold of a portrait.
Yeah.
And it's kind of half done. The molding is it's a slow, laborious process, which I wish I could afford to get someone else to do for me, but unfortunately, I have to do it myself most of the time.
Very good. And then upstairs is a sort of a storeroom for you?
Yeah, pretty much. I had a big tidy out recently, so there's very little up there. So we're not. The tour doesn't go up there, but it's actually a little bit warmer up there in wintertime as well. So in summertime I spend more time downstairs, and in wintertime I spend more time upstairs.
Okay.
Just from the point of view of physical comfort.
I know. And so is in terms of your workshops and so on, would that be a big part of your practice now?
It seems to go in phases. So like over the last couple of weeks, I've taught quite a lot of workshops, but they're only like 3 or 4 days at a time. So it doesn't eat too badly into the time I have to do my own work. Basically.
Well, I'm sure there's quite a lot of preparation.
Initially there was, because I had to build all the tables and all the stands and all the bits and pieces, but with each workshop there's less preparation, because the whole process becomes a little bit more streamlined,
And tell us about your typical experience of a student working with you on a workshop. What do they come with? What do they go away with?
Who are they? Well,
I've
had everything from complete and utter beginners to like professional artists, professional portrait painters, things like that. So anyone can get a pretty good outcome. The clay and the sculpting process is quite forgiving. So you essentially can't really make a mistake that you can't correct. Yeah. So if any mistake can be addressed somehow. Unlike drawing and painting to a certain extent, where there comes a point where you have to accept that your piece just isn't working and you have to start again. With sculpting, and particularly with sculpting portraits, you can endlessly correct and refine. And because you can take measurements as well, you can give yourself a framework to work within. So even beginners can get quite a good outcome. But obviously, people who have a little bit of experience and a little bit of who are used to making visual judgments and who are used to depicting form will get a much better outcome.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And then do they go away with it, or can they cast it in bronze? Or
yeah, exactly. So they keep it at the end. So like for example, for a 3-day portrait workshop, they will have a finished or an almost finished portrait at the end of it, which is in wet clay. So they have to, if they want to preserve it, it has to be either fired or molded and cast or whatever. There's numerous ways of treating it. The clay, unfortunately, in the long term is not stable on its own. It needs to be there needs to be a subsequent step to preserve it.
And so what are those steps? That, you know, if somebody would
Well,
like
firing.
if somebody would like to
Yeah,
do your workshop, Alan, and you know, they came up with a very good result, I'm sure a lot of them would love to have that for the rest of their naturals. So
yeah, they would, yeah, and rightly so. So like firing it is the simplest thing.
okay.
So the sculpture has to be hollowed out and then obviously fired in the kiln, and then the other alternative is that you mold it and cast it, and there are numerous different ways of molding it and numerous different ways of casting it, all of which can either be attempted by the person themselves or can be done by a foundry or whoever. You know, there are people who do that, provide those sort of services.
Okay. And is it very expensive to do something like that, say in bronze?
Yeah, pretty much.
Can you give us a rough idea?
To mold and cast a life-size portrait, so head and neck, would be probably between 1,000 and 1,500 euros in bronze.
Yes. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
And the prices tend to go up and down. Like the price of bronze fluctuates, and the price of materials fluctuate. Unfortunately, they tend to fluctuate up most of the time, but so the prices do change. But that's probably give or take. But bronze, it's worth it. Bronze is absolutely beautiful material, and only gets better with age. And the foundry, like the molding and casting process, is so good that you will actually see your fingerprints in the finished work. Like, you know,
really,
the level of detail is absolutely incredible.
Fantastic, fabulous.
Yeah.
Very interesting process. Okay, Alan, let's look at some of your work.
So you asked me to pick about 15 pieces of work, and I've done so much over the years, and it's changed so much that it's quite hard to pick out 15 specific works, but I've tried to spread them chronologically as much as I could. So and spread them between drawing and sculpture. So this one, starting right at the beginning, basically, this is actually a drawing, and I did the first version of this when I was still in college. So this was in my degree show in Falmouth College of Arts in 2001, and at the time I was kind of interested in like Victoriana and like 1930s American sideshow circus kind of aesthetics and things like that, which you can see clearly those influences in this drawing. It's very well trodden territory visually, but it's hugely enjoyable as well at the same time. So I was kind of indulging it. And I can just think back when like how this drawing took me weeks and weeks to do at the time. If I was to do the same drawing now, I could do it in a day or two. Like it's just by so much practice, I've been able to get these processes really fast, basically, you know, over the years.
Yes.
But the reason I put this specific drawing in actually is because this drawing led directly to me getting the Ross O'Carroll Kelly commission.
Did it?
The publishers saw this drawing and they were like, "Oh, we like this." You know, they liked the sort of very, very busy nature of it. There's an awful lot going on. It has a kind of a Where's Wally kind of feel to it, I suppose. You know.
One wonders sometimes what's going on in your mind, Alan.
Well, I mean, I don't know where it comes from. I put the pen down on the paper and it all just comes out. I don't know where from.
All right.
But if you go on to the second slide there, you'll see so this is one of the drawings from one of the Ross O'Carroll Kelly books, and you can see the similarity in approach, let's say.
Yes.
You know, the similar kind of grotesque characters. In terms of execution, these drawings are very simple. They're just pen and ink. There's no sort of gimmicks to it. Compositionally, they're slightly tricky, some of the Ross O'Carroll Kelly ones, because they run across a double page spread in the book. So the gutter of the book runs down the middle of all the drawings. So it's like composing two separate drawings almost that have to work together, because nothing important can go in the very middle of the drawing. And
can I guess the theme behind this particular drawing?
You probably can.
Ross O'Carroll Kelly having sex with somebody.
Yeah, a tryst.
Ending in a disaster.
A dangerous liaison in a portaloo. Yeah, exactly. So this, over the years, I did a whole load of drawings, posters, and brochures and promotional work for Body and Soul Festival, which is a midsummer art and music festival. It's actually on this weekend, so it started today or yesterday, I think.
Okay.
And this is just an example of one of the posters that I did for them. This in back 2012, and there was actually a daytime and a nighttime version of this poster to reflect the kind of daytime and nighttime aspect of the festival itself. And in the nighttime aspect, I changed all the details in the poster very slightly so that they looked the same at first glance, but had subtle differences to them. It was an absolutely huge amount of work, and nobody noticed because no one ever saw the two posters side by side, so they just assumed they were the same.
Really? Yeah.
So, like, all the work I did on it was never noticed by anybody at all. But nonetheless, it's a piece of work I'm quite proud of.
And if it was the same, are there be elements maybe like the center that are exactly the same?
Yeah. So the scroll, I suppose, was exactly the same, but the color scheme was different. So it read, the nighttime one was dark. It was kind of blues and turquoises and purples. You know, it was dark colors. And this obviously is daytime kind of summery colors. But even so, the subtleties of it were missed by people. And this is pen and ink with watercolor, just to say how it was painted. Okay, this is an example. I had an exhibition 12 or 13 or 14 years ago of images done in this style. And at the time, I was quite fascinated by the aesthetics of early photography. So obviously the sort of sepia tones, but also the compositions and the vignettes and the very shallow depths of field and things like that. And I wanted to make illustrations that echoed those aesthetics, but were obviously illustrations. So this is just an example of one of them. They kind of have this sort of children's book, sort of fantastical, otherworldly kind of feel to them, but at the same time they're slightly dark, slightly maybe macabre in some way. And these were done. I was making all the individual elements of these pictures separately and traditionally. So I was making them on paper, then I was scanning them all and composing them digitally. So the final picture itself was actually a photographic output. And some of them I then actually I would do, they were editions of prints, so I might do 25 prints, and then each one was hand tinted, so there would be a certain level of uniqueness, I suppose, to each print. And they were kind of nice to work on. I did them for a period of time and then completely stopped. I moved away from it. And it's whenever I show one of these and talk about them, I look at them and I think I should go back and do some more of these. You know, I think they maybe had something a little bit unique about them.
Okay. So these weren't commissioned as such. These are your own. No,
these were actually for exhibition. So I suppose this would be the fine art end of illustration, if you want to call it that. They were self-initiated and they were exhibited rather than published or anything like that.
I understand. Yeah.
I think someone just asked what sort of pen do I use. Did I see a little comment?
You may have. I wasn't looking.
And the answer is I use. I don't have a specific sort of pen. I like Copic, fine liners, those kind of things. It changes over time, and I also choose the pen based on the characteristics of the ink, really. So certain pens, for example, the ink won't be waterproof, or certain pens I've found, if you do an underdrawing in pencil and then do a pen drawing on top and then rub out the underdrawing, some of the pen marks will rub away as well. So some pens are more robust, like the ink or the pigment is more robust. I vary from time to time, which ones I use.
This one we're looking at here is a part of a series.
Yeah, it is. So again, this was from an exhibition I had in Galway about 5-6 years ago, maybe. And it was a kind of a children's book themed exhibition or children's themed exhibition. And I had about 20 pictures in it, and they were linked. They kind of had a implied narrative, let's call it that, between them. So all the pictures featured recurring elements like this girl, the owl, and some of the motifs like the stars and things like that. but there wasn't actually a sequential narrative running through them, although you could kind of read it into it maybe if you were that way inclined. And these were again just pen and ink on a kind of like antique white paper, you might call it, or ivory paper. And then the colored accents were done with just ink, dye ink.
Sure. What sort of size would this work be?
I think that was about maybe 300 millimeters in diameter. Okay. So what's that in inches? Like 12 inches in diameter, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I was guessing about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're quite finely detailed when you see them up close. Okay, I included this one. This, to the best of my knowledge, is the only piece of my work that has been tattooed onto someone.
Really?
So yeah.
Where?
So, I've had many inquiries over the years about designing tattoos and about people getting drawings I've done tattooed on them. But for one reason or another, to the best of my knowledge, none of them have ever been followed up on, except for this one. So this one was a private commission. I was asked to do my own version of the famous scene from Georges Méliès's very early science fiction film of the rocket crashing into the moon. It's called the film is called A Trip to the Moon. Yes. And this is one of the famous images from it. So I did this drawing for this guy and he loved it. And then a couple of weeks later, I got an email from him saying, do you mind if I actually get it tattooed onto myself? And I was like, no, of course not. Go ahead. And he did. He followed up on it. So he sent me photographs then subsequently of this tattooed onto his arm.
So you actually know who's walking around with your design?
I do. Yeah. It's legit. It's the real thing. So this is done in a very similar style to the last one. It's pen and ink, charcoal, and a little bit of dye to bring out some colored accents. And this one was actually commissioned from me by the Mermaid Arts Centre out in Bray, and they commissioned myself and 3 other artists, I think, to produce an image, and they then posted them to every household in Wicklow, which was kind of nice. Really? So yeah, it was a kind of a Christmas promotion, just hello, here we are kind of thing. Yes. So it was a really nice project to work on, and there was no particular brief other than that we were given the size and we could kind of do whatever we want. So this was it was a sketch that came out of one of my sketchbooks that I worked up. Okay. And into this finished work. Yeah. And again, some of these are so detailed. I don't really know if people can actually, they're at this scale, they're quite hard to see. This was a privately commissioned piece, and it's just kind of one of my own personal favorites from over the years. So I included it. I think sometimes if I would be critical of an aspect of my own work, it's that it's not compositionally terribly subtle sometimes. But I kind of think that this one probably has a little bit of balance in the composition that works well and kind of works from a distance as well as very close up. I think that's with my work, sometimes you have to almost have your nose against it to really see what's going on. Whereas with the likes of this, you can appreciate something about it from quite far away, which would not always be a characteristic of my work.
When you're producing something like this, Alan, would you do any preparatory work, like sketches beforehand? Yeah,
generally speaking, I would kind of figure it out in pencil first. And I've kind of found that over the years, the amount of preparatory work that I have to do has become less and less. So for the early work, like if we think about the very first image I showed of that kind of circus sideshow, that kind of Victorian thing, like I would have done piles and piles of drawings and sketches to work out every individual character and all the details, whereas I kind of trust myself much more now, and I can actually just go for it. Sometimes I don't need to work out every detail in advance. It can be, some aspects of it can be done, can be ad-libbed, let's say, or done on the move. This, I think this might be the last of the illustration work I'm going to show before I move on to the sculpture.
It is. Yeah, it is.
This is an image that was commissioned by Body and Soul Festival, and it was actually a promotional image for a Halloween ball in Imma. So it was a poster artwork. And it was just a kind of it's a cascade of characters, basically, of kind of grotesque, macabre, Halloween-y looking characters.
Yes.
And it's directly inspired by 3 lost paintings by Gustav Klimt called Medicine, Philosophy and Jurisprudence, which I think were destroyed during World War II. I'm not 100% sure about that. They don't exist anymore in any case, but there are kind of grainy photographs of them.
Yes.
And there are these amazing cascades of characters. So I kind of, I suppose, appropriated his compositional approach and applied my own aesthetic to it, or my own kind of way of working the characters. Yeah. And I ended up with this. It was a really, really nice project to work on. It was a nice to be able to indulge the figuring out of all these characters. And
yes, I can imagine
this kind of quite dramatic composition.
Okay, so moving on to
sculptures. It seems like moving from the last slide to this slide that it's an abrupt jump, but what I would say is that the step from drawing to sculpture is not as big as people think it is. Sculpture is drawing in the 3 dimensions, in the 3rd dimension, and a lot of the judgments and the depictions of form are the same. Basically, you're making the same, you're taking the same approach. It's just that it has an extra dimension. So while aesthetically it might be a big jump, it's not as abrupt a change as it seems when you jump from one slide to the other like that. Mm-hmm. This is a portrait of a painter called Nina Ruminska, who's a friend of mine, and a very, very talented portraiturist herself. And she actually got to the final of the Sky Portrait Artist of the Year last year. And in the final, she asked if I would pose for her. So she painted a portrait of me for the final of this competition. And I agreed to do it on condition she would then sit for me. So this is the outcome of her sitting for me. So this is a bronze portrait of Nina Ruminska, which is actually, I just found out yesterday, has been accepted into the Society of Portrait Art, the Society of Portrait Sculptors annual exhibition in London in August. So this is going to be exhibited in London in August. Which
and am I right in saying that you are a member of that organisation? I
am, yeah, as of quite recently.
And the only Irish person.
The only ever Irish person. Ever. Yeah. I'm hugely flattered by that and humbled, because there are other sculptors in Ireland who are very, very good, but they accepted me in last year, so I'm delighted.
Lovely, great accolade.
Yeah. So just before the war in Ukraine broke out, I was invited to Moscow to teach a workshop over there. So I spent 2 weeks, 2 very, very enjoyable weeks in Moscow, teaching a portrait sculpture workshop. And this is the outcome of it. That's my sculpture on the left, or my demonstration sculpture, and the model is on the right. And he was actually a guy that they found in the local Orthodox church in Moscow. Yes. And he couldn't have looked more Russian, so it was brilliant. You know, I was kind of hoping that I was going to arrive over there and they were going to have someone really, really Russian looking. You know, he had this big square beard and the whole lot. Yes, like, so it was brilliant. And a great experience, the whole thing.
Fantastic, yeah.
This is a 2-figure allegorical sculpture of it's called Triumph Over Folly. And this is about 1 meter tall. It's in plaster. It's just a maquette, like it's a model for something that was proposed to be much, much larger. It was actually proposed to go on the empty plinth outside City Hall, but unfortunately it was passed over for that project. But I decided to pursue it anyway, or decided to make a larger version of it. So I made a version of it in plaster that was about maybe 3 meters tall. And it didn't really fully work. So I had this kind of very large sculpture that was about 3/4 finished that I kind of gave up on a little bit. So I had just moved on to other projects. So I actually smashed it up. And if you go on to the next slide, this is one of the fragments of that sculpture. So after I smashed it up, there was bits lying around, and this is one of the fragments that was left. And it's just on its own, I thought it was very, very interesting. So I preserved it, and I kind of finished it off a little bit. And this is actually currently in the RHA in the annual show at the moment. They have it up at the top of the stairs overlooking the atrium. So it's about 2/3 life size.
Okay.
And I actually made this during the pandemic, so models weren't available at the time, so I had to work from photographs and things like that. So it was quite a slow process because getting all the anatomy correct and the poses correct was quite difficult without having a live model, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
so Alan,
worked out okay in the end.
Yeah, is this pure clay then? It's not fired or anything?
Sculpted in clay over steel armature and then molded and cast into plaster.
Oh, it's cast. Okay, all right, yeah.
Yeah. So this is, so what you're looking at there is plaster. It's actually, yeah, it's stable, like it's plaster and it's got a steel structure inside it, so it's very strong. And the plaster actually has a little bit of pigment in it, so it gives it that kind of yellowy kind of color.
This is the one you're looking at.
And this one, so I spoke about this one when we were doing the tour of the studio. This is the one that the mold got damaged on the way back from Florence. It got damaged in my suitcase, so I have I think Ryanair baggage handlers to thank for making this a much more interesting sculpture than it would have been otherwise.
I see. Okay.
This is 2.5 meters tall, and it's actually a portrait of a real person. Very briefly, I'll describe how this sculpture came about. Just before the pandemic, I was in Florence, and I was sitting in Bologna airport on the way back, and walking up and down was this guy who kind of looked like an aging Hell's Angel. He just had the most amazing face and head, kind of wizened, big nose, you know, the whole lot, big beard. And I was sitting there watching him, and I was thinking, if this guy's on my flight, I'm going to ask him to model for me because he just had such a brilliant face. As it turned out, he wasn't on my flight. But when I got back, I made a very small sculpture of him, about maybe 6 inches tall, of his portrait, just from memory. And I photographed it and I put it up on my social media, and I kind of said, is there anyone out there who looks like this? I want to do a sculpture, you know? And what happened was someone shared it on the Facebook group that all of the guys who are extras on Vikings, they have a Facebook group.
You do?
So basically, every fella with a beard in Ireland contacted me saying, I'll model for you, I'll model for you. hundreds of fellas with beards looking to model, queuing up. And so eventually, generally speaking, they were all too young, actually. I was looking for someone a little bit older with a little bit more character in their face. And eventually, I found somebody, and he came up and he sat in my garden. He couldn't come in because it was during the one of the lockdowns, and I took photographs of him. I made a life-size portrait, and then I blew it up to this colossal size. So I built a wooden kind of structure underneath, and then I sculpted it in plaster over the top, and resulted in this. And I'm delighted to say, actually, this is going into Sculpture in Context at the end of the summer, so it will be exhibited in the Botanic Gardens for a month or two in September, I think.
Fabulous. And how high does it stand? Roughly
2.5 meters.
2.5 meters. Ooh.
Yeah. So it's up a ladder. Like I was up a ladder working on the top of it.
Yeah, that's a great story, Alan.
Yeah.
I like that. Do you know, I'd say most artists have had that occasion where they see somebody and they say, "My God, I'd love to paint that person," or "I'd love to," in your case, sculpt them, you know.
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing that. Okay, so let's go through a couple of comments and then we'll open it up to the floor. Jane, is anyone visiting Paxos this summer? 6 Irish ceramic artists are exhibiting during the Irish Wings Festival, 14th of July to 12th of August, etc. Okay. Pamela, thank you. Oh yeah, this is about the Sult artists and Bridget, the 1500th anniversary. Fiona Devlin, beautiful work. Stephanie McLaughlin, great work. What type of pen do you use? We talked about that, I think, didn't we?
Yeah.
Stephanie, yeah. Love the drawings, Gillian. Carol, just love the variety of your works. Your sculpture is beautiful. Fiona, reminiscent of Barry Clarke like work.
I just found pen in my pocket, so this is the one I'm currently using at the moment, and it's a Unipin fine line. So that's the one I have at the moment. But I would say I don't exclusively use those. I chop and change.
You can get those in any
Evans,
size,
yeah,
can't
Evans is where you tend to get all this
you?
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Fiona Devlin, reminiscent of Harry Clarke. Have you ever done stained glass drawings?
No, I haven't actually. No, no.
Okay, there you are now. There's an idea. Oh yeah, Yvonne, your illustrations are so detailed and amazing.
Thank you.
Stephanie McLaughlin, congratulations. Jen Donnery, hi Alan, can you describe the process of shipping your sculpture for exhibitions abroad? Good question.
Yeah, it's terrific, the process is. So last year I had 2 sculptures in an exhibition in London. I packaged them. I built a lovely wooden crate for them. I packaged them up very carefully. I phoned UPS and they came and collected them, and then they disappeared. And they turned up in Germany about 2 weeks later.
Really?
So this year what I did was I built my lovely wooden crate and I packaged them up very carefully, and I actually brought them over myself the other day on the ferry.
You were mentioning that over to the UK.
Yeah. I decided I would just go over and back, and I went over. Now it was pretty hard work, I'll say, because I had to leave Ireland, bring them on the ferry, train to London, and then all across London in the tube with 2 big bronze sculptures in a crate. So it was tough going, but at least I know they got there in one piece on time. You know, there are companies like Morris Ward and people like that who ship artwork internationally and will deal with all the customs and all that, but it's really expensive. That's the thing.
I can imagine it's extremely expensive from a weight perspective.
Yeah.
You know? Eilish says, if I heard correctly, Alan has only been sculpting since 2018. You heard correctly. It's incredible to reach this level of competency in such a short period of time. In relation to the piece,
I'll make a point about that though. It didn't come out of nowhere.
No, you did say that, Alan. Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to get people to have the impression that I suddenly was able to sculpt like this from nowhere, because I had figured out drawing already. So I'd been doing life drawing and I'd studied anatomy and stuff like that. All that kind of thing I already had that under my belt. So
yeah,
it was really only a matter of taking it into the 3rd dimension. So
absolutely, I can see that. You did explain that well, because in a sense, you really didn't start in 2018. You started when you were 20.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or even before. It was. The 2018 was just the abrupt move in.
Okay, she finishes this, Eilish, that is, in relation to the piece that you disassembled after it wasn't used, what, if any, advice have you for artists who find themselves experiencing rejection? Not that I imagine it's something you experience these days.
I experience it regularly. I've been applying to the Arts Council for grants for 20 years and I've never got a penny off them. Every year, to the point that they've almost broken my will. And so rejection is a common thing. And I'll happily say that when I get knocked back from something, I spend a couple of days questioning, why the hell am I doing this to myself? And why have I accepted this life sentence? Yeah. But I've been doing it for long enough now that I know that passes, and that actually, this is quite a good life to have. Yeah. But everyone experiences rejection, and I would say actually just a comment in relation to rejection. When you are rejected in favor of something that's better than what you can do, it can have a very, very strong motivating factor. It can be really motivating, that you're like, I have to get better. If I'm going to get accepted by whatever it is, I need to get better. I need to get better. If you're rejected for something in favor of something that's worse than what you can do, that's very, very demoralizing, because you know that no matter how good you get, no matter how hard you work, you can't compete with whatever the criteria are that you're being judged on. Yeah.
And also so much about Alan is it's subjective, in that it depends on the people who are actually judging, and that changes.
It does. I don't think art is as subjective as people like to let on that it is, because if it isn't contemporary art, but contemporary art is another thing. But if we talk about representational art, there are certain principles and certain I suppose criteria that it can be judged by, that everything can be judged by the same principles and criteria, so it is subjective to a certain extent, but not completely.
No, well, fair enough. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So listen, I've allowed everyone to unmute themselves if you'd like to make a comment to Alan or ask a question of him directly. Please try and unmute yourself.
Hi, Alan. I adore your sculpture, especially the girl who agreed to, you swapped, you did a sculpture of her and she, you know, vice versa.
Yeah.
I was so, I don't know, there's something about that face, the way you did it. I can't explain it. I'd love to.
Well, she was an excellent subject. She was an
Beautiful.
excellent subject, I should say. So when your subject is as good, it kind of makes the job easier, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. But I love your accents with your sculpture as well, because I had that experience. I'd spent a long time, a few weeks doing a sculpture, a portrait, and I brought it into the lovely Leo, God rest his soul, and I took off the binding of plastic that I had kept, spraying it for a while before I could get a slot. And when I went in and removed it, half of the face came away. The top half came away, but left the nose and the rest of it. So my kind of immediate reaction, but you know what? Actually, Leo said it's fine. We'll do it as it is.
Go for it anyway.
So we called it perfection.
Carol, am I right in saying that you sold it too?
I have sold it, I've also given it as a present, a wedding present to somebody, which they loved. But it was a happy accident. And
sometimes these things can give a work a dimension that they wouldn't have had otherwise, you know.
Totally. And just to say to Irish, sorry.
In the moment, it can be quite horrific, you know, in the moment when it happens, but it can bear out into something fruitful in the longer term.
I think for about 5 seconds I was speechless, which is very rare in my case. It's a work alone. Just to say to Eilish that I don't know how many times over the years, I think maybe 30 years of entering the RHA, I think I've got in twice. But you know, it's worth, you just keep going and don't let
it's difficult. Like sometimes when it is difficult when you get knocked back, like to pick it up and go again, but you just have to, like, there's no other choice.
Totally. Anyway, thank you for a gorgeous display of work. It's fabulous.
Oh, not at all. Thank you,
Alan.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Alan. That was superb. Thank you so much.
Not at all. Thank you.
It was lovely to see all your work and to hear about how your practice has progressed from, you know, something completely different to where it is now, and you know, it's just so interesting. And I'm fascinated how you interpret these briefs from, you know, publishers to create characters that have come out of your imagination. You're not told exactly what to do, and I know you said that to me. No one tells me what to do, so it's very much your own creation.
I don't like it.
I know you don't like saying that.
It's as I said, it's a transaction of trust in both directions.
Yes, absolutely. So that makes it even more interesting. Your interpretation of things. So listen, well done, you. I'm looking forward to seeing what you produce in the future. Have you any particular plans, Alan?
No, just at the moment, no big plans. So I have the exhibition in the United Arts Club, which is not so long ago. And while I was working that, I was putting a load of little smaller commissions kind of on the long finger. So I'm gradually working my way through them at the moment. And when they're out of the way, I will embark on some other scheme, but I don't actually know what it's going to be yet. So unfortunately, I can't give you any sneak previews of anything just at the moment.
Take things as they come.
Exactly, yeah.
Very good. Anyway, listen, enjoy your summer. And everyone else, thank you all so much for watching and for supporting the art as well over the years. We're going to take a break for the summer. I don't really call it a break because I'm going to be working on the documentary films on 5 new artists, which will be a bit of fun, and I'm looking forward to that. So until maybe late September, early October at the latest, we'll be back doing our series again. And hopefully at that stage, I'll be able to show you 1 or 2 of the documentaries, if not all 5. We'll see. Anyway, thanks all so much. Enjoy your summer and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye. And Alan, thank you.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.